Alright, so let's talk about the trade wars, how it can affect you, your stocks portfolio, the US economy, and the global economy as the whole. So let's jump right into this video. Let's not waste any time. I'm going to try to make this video pretty quick, maybe only a few minutes long, so to sort of to give you an overview of what a trade war is. The pros cons, mostly cons. There's the like that's much the pros. All right, so I really don't want to get political here. I'm gonna to try to be as neutral as possible here. I'm really sorry if I offend any money or if the people will disagree with me, because whatever you talk announce macroeconomic events, they are always going to be somebody who disagrees with you, and one way or another. So these aren't 100% fact that I'm given to you. I'm just going to give you the different variant options from this, and sort you can create your own options from this. So like I said, trying to be pretty neutral here. Let's get into this video. Alright, so the first thing that we need to do is to understand what a trade war actually is, and it really stems for the trade protectionisms, which at first it's too bad. It's when the countries want to protect their own industry, forced their own industries, and so what they will do is they will impose these important traffics on other countries, goods that are going into the domestic country. For example, the US would impose steel traffics, for examples that means that if China wants to import steels into America, there's going to be the tariff imposed. That so you have to pay more for Chinese steels if you live in the America, because of this tariff is sort of like the tax. Okay, and so this is a sense would help you. To help our US industry, the steel industry, because it would be enabled them to compete with the Chinese competitors or other global competitors. But there's a lot of the cons to trade protectionisms, because what happens is, for example, if the US imposes these tariffs on the certain imports from the certain countries, that happens a lot of the times, and all the countries will impose tariffs on the US goods going into those countries. So, for example, since Donald Trump imposed these new tariffs, China responded by the imposing some $3 billion on the certain products in the tariffs. For I think is white food, certain steel products actually going into the China, and then also European printed to retail as well. And this is really how trade wars can sort of occur, because I sort of the like to think of it like the playground if in first grade, and your friend just give you the little nudge, you might push you a little bit, and so you push him back in a little bit harder, and then he push you back even harder than you push him back even harder, and then all of the sudden, before you know, if you are just like the showing each others and fighting with each other with one of your good friends for no real any reasons other than just it's sort of the escalates, and you can probably relate to that pretty well. They are like do what happens sometimes where you don't really mean to get into the fight with someone, but you just keep pushing and harder, and then all of a sudden you are the full out fight. Now, trade wars generally don't end up in the military conflicts, but that's sort of how I like to think of the trade wars, because really they don't start off the terrible. Usually starts off the pretty small. Somebody puts a tariff on the certain products, and then the other countries start with retaliating then what ends up happening is all of these countries start putting these import tariffs into the blocking of trade and really protecting their own countries. And you don't have to be the economist to understand that trade in general is going to be beneficial for the economic growth, for the global economic growth. You can take an Econ 101 classes in the high schools or in the college to understand that trade is almost always going to be beneficial in terms of the growth. And that's why you probably have seen the stocks market in the US really dropping in the past weeks pretty significantly because people are scared of the possible upcoming trade wars. So I'm never we're looking for the global economic events. One of the best ways to sort of predict the future is to look back into the past and understand what happened in the previous trade wars. So probably one of the most notable trade wars, at least in the US, was to right occurred after the Smooth Heavily Act in the 1930s. And this is actually the act that really has been taught to sort of drown out the Great Depressions and made it a lot worse. In reality, needed to be, and so what happened in the 1930s is they imposed this smooth, heavily act in the US did, and in the end, up actually really hurting US industry. Now, initially, it was to protect US farmers, but in the end, it up hurting the US as a whole and actually the global economy because global economic completely just fell off the cliff after the Smooth Heavily Act. And a chain of the events that really occurred at the sort of the block of global trade, and countries stopped trading with each other and focus on their own country, and that has the pros and cons. It's mostly cons in the reflection reference to the global economics growth. That's like the biggest key want to take from this, that the global economic growth over the one run will likely be hidden hindered when you impose all of these traffics on the each others when have this massive trade war. Now we are not currently in the massive trade war, but that's the biggest threat here that people are concerned about now. Like I said, I really don't want to get political here. I'm trying to stay neutral, but let's just examine what Donald Trump mentioned in tweeted. I believe that on the March 2nd, he mentioned that trade wars are good and easy to win. And so to sort of pick this apart a little bit to understand, that's what he is trying to say. I think what he is trying to say is that the US has a trade deficit of about $800 billion, and so trade deficit. So this is actually something that economics can't entirely agree on. Whatever or not trade deficits are actually the positive or a negative from the economy over the long run, and I will leave some links for that down below because there is the argument on both sides, but in general consensus is that trade deficits are not gonna be very beneficial for the economy, especially when you're ruining a very large trade deficit. And if you remember back in the Donald Trump campaign, I think in the 2015-2016 trade wars, something that he was really running on the same. What we don't have the good trade that the US has the massive trade deficit, and that is the true. They do have the very large trade deficit, so I think that's what he is referring to when he says that the trade wars are good, but on the country trade wars they are not going to be good for the global economic growth. And really here no winners in the trade wars because everybody's growth is going to be slowing down for the most part when you have to trade wars. So I really hope that leaders throughout the world are smart enough to not end up in the trade war that would just be bad for economic growth. For the global economic growth, it just wouldn't help, and it would just heighten everything, and it's just not fun to get into the trade wars, and there's really no reasons for it. So I really do hope that world leaders can figure this out. The World Trade Organization is the place, but how much power do they really have? Not a ton of, and they are also pretty slow with these decisions. So keep that in mind. But generally speaking, you can see that personally you cannot personally affect whatever or not a trade war actually occurs. You watching this video right now, me standing here making this video, we can't personally affect whatever or not a trade war occurs on it, not in our powers. So because we can't actually affect what's going here, I think it's important to remember to not focus too much on the macroeconomic events. So as the Jeremy from the Financial Educations summed it up pretty well a few days ago in one of these videos, he mentioned that there is always going to be some type of the issue every single year. There's going to be some scare that gonna prevent people from the investing into the stocks market. For example, last year it was the Newton with the Kim Jong, and he is going to nuke Guam. Is he going to nuke Hawaii? How that gonna affect the economy? And obviously, nukes aren't going to be helpful for the economy. But that was the big scare. There are people where they scared around that, and where every year, if you go back in time, every single year there's going to be some big major concern that's going to stop people for months and months at a time from investing into the stock market. Now I'm going to tell you to go out and put all your money in the stocks market right now, but what I'm saying is that here's always gonna be the issue, and that's why I like to do the same dollar cost averaging. So every month I invest into the stocks market regardless of the macroeconomics affairs what's going in the world, because I like to dollar cost average, and I also think that you can always find companies, you can always find the undervalued companies regardless of the where the economy is, regardless of the where the world is. As long as we are not a full auto apocalypse, there are always gonna be companies. Actually, even we are in a full out apocalypse, there are always gonna be the companies and the businesses that some ways are thriving. Okay, so even if you go back into in time, you look at the great depressions when things were terrible, but at some point, at some time, there were companies during the great depressions in the bottom of the road that were actually thriving now. They were very far from the few between, but they did exist, and so it's obviously very difficult to find a company that going to be thriving during the very bad economic times. But that's sort of that I wanted to bring across here. Just don't focus too much on the macroeconomic events. That's something that so many people just focus on so much, but it's not in their control, and it's so difficult. It's so difficult to predict macroeconomic events. That's why somebody like the Warren Buffett, he's got 80 to 90 billion dollars. He's one of the most successful investors of the all time. He says this as well. He says don't focus too much on the macroeconomic events. So obviously he probably personally is interested in the trade war. He probably interested in the knowing what's going to happen, but he is not focusing too much on it, and he not letting that to get too much in his way when he is thinking about investing in the company. So keep that in mind as well. I think that kind of the warps up this video. If you have any questions or the comments, just leave them down below. I will be happy to get back to you. Like I said, trying to stay kind of the neutral on yours. I might have said something that you disagree with, and I apologize for that. I am gonna to leave just like a ton of the links down in the descriptions below, because there is a lot of the different varying options and the facts, and what I'm straight was protectionisms, and how it can affect the global economy and the US economy. So that's it for this video. I see you in the next one.